Sun Tzu is one of the most famous names when it comes to military strategy, but here's an interesting fact. We don't actually know much about him. Some historians believe that he might not have even been a real person. How can someone who is so well known be such a mystery? Well, even though The Art of War, the book he is said to have written, has been studied for thousands of years, there are very few records about Sun Tzu's life. His story is mostly based on ancient texts that were written many years after he lived. Most people think that Sun Tzu was born in the state of Qi in eastern China around the 6th century BC, which means he lived over 2,500 years ago. His real name was Sun Wu, but he earned the name Sun Tzu, which means Master Sun, because of his expertise in military strategy. People began calling him Master because he was considered a teacher of how to win wars. Despite the lack of details about his life, Sun Tzu is best known for writing The Art of War, one of the most influential books on military strategy ever written. This book doesn't just teach how to fight, it explains how to think, plan, and use your mind to win battles in the smartest way possible. Instead of relying on brute force, Sun Tzu taught that a clever strategy can help you win without even fighting. This idea made him famous and helped his work stand the test of time. But how did we learn about Sun Tzu in the first place if there are so few details about him? Most of what we know comes from a historian named Sima Qian. Sima Qian lived during the Han Dynasty, around 100 BC, which was about 400 years after Sun Tzu supposedly lived. He wrote a huge history book called the Shiji, or Records of the Grand Historian. In this book, Sima Qian talks about important people in China's past, including Sun Tzu. Sima Qian's Shiji tells us that Sun Tzu was a military general who worked for the king of a state called Wu. But here's where things get a little tricky. Sima Qian also wrote about another military strategist named Sun Bin, who lived around 200 years after Sun Tzu. Some historians believe that Sun Tzu and Sun Bin might actually be the same person, or that maybe Sun Bin was the real author of The Art of War. This is one of the reasons why Sun Tzu remains such a mysterious figure. Another book that tells stories about Sun Tzu is called the Wu Yue Chungqiu, which was written around the 1st century AD. This book says that Sun Tzu might have been born in either Qi or Wu, but it was written so long after his supposed lifetime that it's hard to know how accurate it is. Despite these uncertainties, what we do know is that Sun Tzu's ideas in the art of war have had a lasting influence on the world. To understand Sun Tzu's ideas, we need to take a closer look at what life was like in China during the time he lived. Sun Tzu lived during a period called the Spring and Autumn period. This was a time when China was not a united country. Instead, it was made up of many small states, each ruled by different kings and lords. These states were constantly fighting with each other, trying to expand their territories and become more powerful. At this time, China was technically under the rule of the Zhou dynasty. The Zhou dynasty had once been very powerful, but by the time Sun Tzu was born, the Zhou kings didn't have much control anymore. They were still the official rulers, but the real power was in the hands of the lords who controlled the smaller states. These lords often ignored the Zhou kings and made decisions on their own, which led to a lot of fighting between the states. The Spring and Autumn period lasted from about 770 BC to 476 BC, and during this time, China was in a constant state of warfare. It wasn't just about who had the biggest army. The states were also trying to gain resources, like food and land, to support their growing populations. This meant that almost every leader was looking for ways to become more powerful, which led to constant battles. Sun Tzu grew up in this world of conflict. Every day, people were thinking about war, how to win it, how to avoid it, and how to use it to gain power. This was the perfect environment for someone like Sun Tzu, who was deeply interested in military strategy. He saw that there was more to war than just sending soldiers to fight. He believed that the best way to win was by using your mind, not just your muscles. One of the most important figures in Sun Tzu's story is King Helu, the ruler of the state of Wu. Wu was a small state located in the southeastern part of China, near what is now Shanghai. Even though Wu wasn't one of the biggest or strongest states, King Helu had big dreams for his kingdom. He wanted to make Wu a powerful force in China, and he believed that Sun Tzu could help him achieve that goal. According to the stories, King Helu was impressed by Sun Tzu's ideas in the art of war. He believed that Sun Tzu's strategies could help him win battles and make Wu stronger. King Helu brought Sun Tzu to his court and made him a general in his army. Sun Tzu's job was to help Wu win wars against its enemies, especially the powerful state of Chu. But before King Helu fully trusted Sun Tzu, he wanted to see if Sun Tzu's ideas actually worked. This led to one of the most famous stories about Sun Tzu, the story of the concubines. A concubine was a woman who lived in the king's palace. They were not soldiers, and they had no experience with war. King Helu asked Sun Tzu to prove his military skills by training his concubines, which seemed like an impossible task. Sun Tzu accepted the challenge. He gathered 180 concubines and divided them into 2 groups. He gave them simple instructions on how to march and follow orders. But the concubines didn't take him seriously. They laughed and didn't follow his commands. Sun Tzu repeated the instructions, but the women still refused to listen. Sun Tzu knew that discipline was the most important part of a successful army. Without discipline, soldiers would not follow orders, and battles would be lost. To show how serious he was about discipline, Sun Tzu made a tough decision. He ordered the 2 leaders of the concubines to be executed for not following orders. This shocked King Helu, who tried to stop Sun Tzu from carrying out the punishment. But Sun Tzu explained that in war, discipline was more important than anything else. After the executions, the rest of the concubines followed Sun Tzu's orders perfectly. This story shows just how important discipline was to Sun Tzu. He believed that without it, even the best strategies would fail. After proving his methods with the concubines, Sun Tzu became one of King Helu's most trusted generals, and he helped Wu win many important battles. After proving his abilities, Sun Tzu became a key part of Wu's military campaigns. One of his most famous victories was at the Battle of Boju, where he helped Wu defeat the much larger state of Chu. The Chu was one of the most powerful states in China at the time, and it had a massive army. But Sun Tzu's strategies allowed Wu, which had a much smaller army, to defeat Chu and force its king to flee. Sun Tzu's victory at Boju was significant because it showed that having a bigger army didn't always mean you would win. Sun Tzu believed that strategy and planning were more important than sheer numbers. He taught that a smaller, well-organized army with a clever leader could defeat a much larger force if they used the right tactics. Sun Tzu believed in using deception to confuse the enemy. He often said that in war, all warfare is based on deception. This means that a smart leader should trick the enemy into thinking one thing, while planning something entirely different. For example, Sun Tzu advised that if your army is very strong, you should make the enemy think you are weak. That way, the enemy might attack you when they are not prepared, and you can surprise them with your strength. On the other hand, if your army is weak, you should try to make the enemy believe that you are strong, so they will be too scared to attack. At Boju, Sun Tzu used these principles to outmaneuver the Chu army. Instead of fighting directly, he found ways to confuse the enemy and attack them when they were least expecting it. His strategies allowed the smaller state of Wu to achieve a great victory, even though Chu had more soldiers and resources. Sun Tzu's most famous work, The Art of War, is a book that has been studied for thousands of years. It is not just a book about fighting. It is a book about how to think and plan in order to win. Sun Tzu believed that the best way to win a war was not through fighting, but through strategy and careful planning. He thought that a wise leader could win a battle without even having to fight if they used their mind to outthink their opponent. The Art of War is divided into 13 chapters, and each chapter focuses on a different part of warfare. Some of the key ideas in the book include the importance of knowing your enemy, the value of deception, and the need for flexibility in battle. One of Sun Tzu's most famous quotes is, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." This means that a good leader must understand both their own strengths and weaknesses, as well as the strengths and weaknesses of their enemy. If you know both yourself and your enemy, you will always be able to make the right decisions in battle. Another important idea in the art of war is that war is not always the answer. Sun Tzu believed that the best way to win was to avoid fighting whenever possible. He taught that a wise leader should look for ways to win without having to go to war. This might mean using diplomacy, tricking the enemy into making mistakes, or finding ways to weaken the enemy before a battle even starts. Sun Tzu also believed that flexibility was key to success in war. He said that a leader must be able to adapt to changing circumstances and be ready for anything. In war, things don't always go as planned, and a good leader must be able to change their strategy quickly to deal with new challenges. Sun Tzu compared war to water, saying that just like water adapts to the shape of the land, a leader must adapt to the situation in order to succeed. Sun Tzu and his lessons in the art of war. The Art of War is much more than just a book about battles. It's a guide that teaches people how to be smart, strategic, and thoughtful in difficult situations. Even though Sun Tzu wrote it over 2,500 years ago, the lessons in the art of war are still useful today. People all around the world have studied this book to learn how to succeed in business, sports, and even everyday life. But what exactly did Sun Tzu teach? And why do his ideas still matter today? One of the most important lessons in the art of war is that a good leader should always plan carefully before taking action. Sun Tzu believed that battles should be won in the mind before they are won on the battlefield. This means that before going into a battle, a leader must think about all the possibilities, weigh the risks, and make a plan that takes into account both the strengths and weaknesses of their army and their enemy's army. Sun Tzu also believed that it was better to avoid fighting if possible. He taught that the best way to win a battle is to not fight at all. This may sound strange for a military leader, but Sun Tzu understood that war is dangerous and costly. He believed that if a leader could win through strategy, without sending soldiers to fight, it was a better solution. He encouraged leaders to use deception, diplomacy, and clever tricks to avoid battles and still achieve victory. For example, one of Sun Tzu's most famous quotes is, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting." This means that the best leaders are the ones who can find a way to defeat their enemies without ever having to send their soldiers into battle. They might trick the enemy into making bad decisions, weaken the enemy's alliances, or make peace through diplomacy. By winning without fighting, leaders could save lives and resources. Another key lesson from the art of war is the importance of flexibility. Sun Tzu compared war to water, saying that just like water changes its shape to fit the land, a good leader must be able to change their strategy to fit the situation. In other words, leaders must be ready to adapt to whatever happens in battle. If the enemy does something unexpected, the leader must be able to quickly adjust their plans. Sun Tzu believed that no battle ever goes exactly as planned. There are always surprises, challenges, and things that go wrong. A leader who is too rigid and sticks to one plan no matter what will not succeed. Instead, Sun Tzu taught that a leader must be flexible, willing to change their approach when needed, and always ready for new challenges. In the art of war, Sun Tzu says, "In the midst of chaos there is also opportunity." This means that even when things seem to be falling apart, a good leader can find a way to turn the situation to their advantage. They can see the hidden opportunities in the confusion of battle and use them to their advantage. For example, if an enemy is advancing quickly and seems unstoppable, a smart leader might retreat and let the enemy tire themselves out before launching a counterattack. Or, if the enemy is too strong in one area, the leader might choose to attack a weaker part of the enemy's army instead. By being flexible and adapting to the situation, a leader can find ways to win even when the odds seem stacked against them. One of the most famous teachings from the art of war is about the importance of knowledge. Sun Tzu believed that the key to winning any battle was to know both yourself and your enemy. He said, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles." This means that a leader must understand their own strengths and weaknesses as well as those of their enemy. Knowing yourself means being aware of what your army can do and what it cannot do. A good leader knows how strong their soldiers are, how much food and supplies they have, and what kind of terrain they can fight on. But it also means knowing your weaknesses. If a leader knows that their soldiers are tired or that they don't have enough supplies, they can plan around these problems and avoid getting into a battle they might lose. Knowing the enemy is just as important. A good leader must gather as much information as possible about their enemy before going into battle. This includes learning about the enemy's army, their strengths, their weaknesses, and their plans. Sun Tzu taught that if a leader knows both themselves and their enemy, they will always be able to make smart decisions and win battles. For example, if a leader knows that their enemy is stronger in hand-to-hand combat but weaker in defending their supply lines, the leader might choose to attack the enemy's supplies instead of fighting them directly. By doing this, they could weaken the enemy and make it easier to win the battle later on. But if a leader goes into battle without knowing themselves or their enemy, they are almost guaranteed to lose. Sun Tzu warned that if you don't know your own strengths and weaknesses, and you don't know your enemies, you will be at a huge disadvantage. One of the most important themes in the art of war is deception, or tricking the enemy. Sun Tzu believed that in war, it was not enough to just be strong or brave. A leader had to be clever and use tricks to confuse and mislead the enemy. He said, "All warfare is based on deception, meaning that the best way to win is to make your enemy think you are going to do one thing when you are actually planning to do something else." For example, Sun Tzu taught that if you are strong, you should make your enemy think you are weak. This way, the enemy might attack you when they are not fully prepared, thinking they can easily defeat you. But when they do, they will be surprised by your strength. On the other hand, if you are weak, you should try to make the enemy think you are strong, so they will be too afraid to attack you. Sun Tzu also encouraged leaders to use decoys and false information to mislead the enemy. For example, a leader might send a small group of soldiers to make it look like they are preparing to attack in one place, while the main army secretly prepares to attack in another place. By keeping the enemy confused and unsure of your real intentions, you can catch them off guard and gain an advantage. One of Sun Tzu's most famous quotes about deception is, "Appear weak when you are strong, and strong when you are weak." This teaches that the best way to win is by confusing your enemy and making them underestimate you. Another important lesson from the art of war is the value of speed and surprise in battle. Sun Tzu believed that a good leader should act quickly and decisively when the opportunity arises. He taught that if you can move your army faster than the enemy expects, you can catch them off guard and win before they have a chance to prepare. Sun Tzu said, "Speed is the essence of war." This means that in battle, moving quickly is often more important than having a large army. If you can strike fast and surprise your enemy, you can win the battle before they even have time to react. This is why Sun Tzu encouraged leaders to keep their plans secret and move their armies swiftly to take advantage of the element of surprise. For example, if the enemy is camped in one place and they think you are far away, you might surprise them by moving your army quickly and attacking their camp before they are ready. By catching them off guard, you can win the battle with fewer losses. Sun Tzu also taught that leaders should avoid getting bogged down in long, drawn-out battles. He believed that quick, decisive victories were always better than long, exhausting wars. He said that a leader should aim to win quickly so that their soldiers don't get tired, their supplies don't run out, and their army remains strong. This way, the army is ready for the next battle and doesn't suffer from low morale or exhaustion. Sun Tzu's teachings are not just for ancient battles. They can be applied to many areas of life today. In fact, the art of war is studied not only by military leaders, but also by business people, coaches, and politicians. Sun Tzu's lessons about strategy, planning, and deception have proven to be useful in many situations beyond the battlefield. In business, leaders often use Sun Tzu's ideas to gain an edge over their competitors. Just like in war, business leaders need to think strategically, know their competition, and plan ahead. For example, a company might use Sun Tzu's idea of deception by keeping their new product a secret until the last minute, surprising their competitors and gaining an advantage in the market. Sports coaches also study the art of war to help their teams win. A football coach might use Sun Tzu's teachings about speed and surprise to design plays that catch the opposing team off guard. By keeping their strategy secret and moving quickly, they can score before the other team has a chance to respond. Even in politics, Sun Tzu's ideas are often used. Politicians who understand the importance of planning, strategy, and deception can use these skills to outmaneuver their opponents and achieve their goals. One modern example of the art of war being applied in real life is during the Gulf War in 1990-1991. General Norman Schwarzkopf, who led the U.S. forces, used many of Sun Tzu's principles to achieve a quick and decisive victory. He used deception to make the enemy believe that the main attack would come from one direction, while the real attack came from another. By using Sun Tzu's ideas of speed, surprise, and deception, Schwarzkopf was able to win the war with minimal losses. Sun Tzu's The Art of War has been around for more than 2,500 years, and its teachings are still as relevant today as they were when it was first written. The book's lessons about strategy, planning, and leadership have stood the test of time because they are not just about war. They are about how to think and make good decisions in any situation. Leaders in every field, from military generals to business executives to sports coaches, continue to study Sun Tzu's teachings because they provide valuable insights into how to succeed. Whether it's winning a battle, closing a business deal, or leading a team to victory, the art of war offers timeless wisdom that can be applied in many different ways. Sun Tzu's The Art of War continues to be one of the most influential books on strategy and leadership in history. Its lessons on the importance of planning, adaptability, speed, and deception have proven to be timeless. Whether applied in ancient battles, modern warfare, business, sports, or everyday decision-making, Sun Tzu's wisdom offers valuable insights that help people achieve their goals without unnecessary conflict. While we may never know everything about the real Sun Tzu, his teachings have survived for over 2 millennia, and they still resonate with leaders all over the world today. Whether we're talking about managing a company, leading a team, or even navigating life's challenges, Sun Tzu's message is clear. Success comes not just from strength, but from intelligence, careful planning, and understanding both yourself and your challenges. Thank you for taking the time to explore the teachings of Sun Tzu and the art of war. We hope these lessons continue to inspire and guide you in all of your future endeavors.